Good evening. I'd like to call the November 23rd meeting of the Mount Vernon Board of Education to order. Please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Trustee Farron, Trustee Jaros,
Here.
Trustee McDowell,
Present.
Trustee Miller,
Here.
Trustee Saunders,
Here.
Trustee White,
Present.
Trustee Nying, Trustee McOwen, Trustee Zamore.
Present.
For the Mr. Zamore is participating via Skype messaging today from the sunny shore of Florida.
Oh.
Quorum is present. Motion to accept the minutes of 11:10:15.
Motion.
Trustee Miller, Trustee Jaros. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain?
Abstain.
Ms. Saunders is abstaining. Mr. McOwen is not present. Motion to approve the minutes of 10:28.
Motion. Second.
Trustee Miller and Trustee Saunders. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. Motion to approve the minutes of 10:14:15.
Motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. Report of the superintendent.
We're going to do the bond,
Yeah, he's under you. Do you want to just go right to the order?
yeah, go right to the audit if you don't mind, and we'll come back to my report.
I'll get a few.
Auditor is Scott Olin, and he will be presenting the audit report for the 14-15 school year. And then Arlene is going to be doing the audit committee's response to the audit report following that.
Go, Sean.
Thank you, Ken. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
I'm here tonight to present, as Ken said, the results of the annual external audit that we performed for the school district for the year ended June 30, 15. Probably a month ago, you all would have received a copy of the full audit report from us, along with a management letter and an extra classroom report. And we went over the financial statements in detail with members of the school district's audit committee. So tonight is more of a summarized presentation of what went on in that meeting of a couple of weeks ago. I do want to say, even though we prepare the entire audit report on behalf of the district, the only part that belongs to us as the auditor is the auditor's opinion, which appears right after the table of contents in the audit report. And we've issued what's known as a clean opinion or an unmodified opinion on the district's finances, meaning that we believe that your financial statements fairly present your results of operations for the fiscal year that ended June 30, 2015. So I see up on the board that they've put up a copy of a PowerPoint presentation that we put together for the district. Unfortunately, my manager, Brian, couldn't be here this evening, so I'm going at this solo. So let's just go through this, and then, of course, I'd be glad to take any comments or questions that you have. If you go to the second page of the PowerPoint.
Right now, it's only up there.
Oh, there we go. Okay. So I brought this up last year, and it's really just to re-inform the folks who may be watching this about the different types of audits that a public school district in New York State undergoes each year. Basically, there are three main types of audits that the district goes through. You have an internal audit function that's done by a firm, Tobin and Company. And they go through and as you can see, analyze what they consider to be risk areas related to the district's finances. And they kind of lay those out for you and then you as a board decide, because obviously you can't go and take a look at everything in 1 year, you guys go out and you tell them, we want you to look at one particular area or maybe two particular areas, and then they'll give you a detailed report on that particular area that you asked them to do. So that's not what our function is. Then you have claims auditors, and those were required under various sections of education law. And the claims auditor can be an employee, an outside contractor, and they're reviewing your weekly or biweekly claims paying process and making sure that all the backup and all the supporting documentation is there to ensure that you're only paying things that have been properly authorized. That's not our function either. So the third thing is what we're here tonight for. As the external auditor, we perform your annual external audit under requirements of the State Education Department, and we perform that audit in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards, generally accepted accounting principles of the United States, and generally accepted auditing standards, and standards promulgated by the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, and also the Comptroller General of the United States. We go to the next page. So our responsibilities under what we call GAS, Generally Accepted Auditing Standards, are to perform your external audit in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards and ensure that our audit is designed to achieve reasonable, and we say reasonable rather than absolute assurance that the financial statements are free from material misstatement. Does it mean these financial statements have no errors in them and are not misstated at all? No. It means we're looking for material, significant things. And based on what we did, we are saying to you that we don't think there are any material misstatements in these financial statements that we're about to present. We're also required, as part of the audit, to communicate with you in writing any deficiencies that we may have found in your internal control processes and procedures. We're not doing an internal control audit. As I said, we're not the internal auditor. We're not doing a deep dive into any one particular area. But as an overall part of reviewing the financial statements, we do have to look at the controls that are in place to ensure that those systems that are generating the numbers, your financial numbers, are done properly. And there are basically three types of deficiencies that we can talk to you about. There could be significant deficiencies or material weaknesses, or there could just be low-level, what we call control deficiencies. We, in our management letter to you and our communication to you in another document that we provided to you, we only identified some minor control deficiencies. So we were satisfied and very happy not to come up, at least in our audit procedures, with anything that we deemed a significant deficiency in your controls or a material weakness in your controls. You don't want those, and we didn't have any of those. We advise management of appropriateness of accounting policies, and so far everything we looked at appeared, to be done properly here. And of course, we're also required to communicate to you if we find any fraud or illegal acts. It's not the mission of our audit to look for those things, but if we come upon them or things come to our attention that indicates that that may occur, we are required under auditing standards to communicate that with you. Again, based on our audit, we had no instances or suspicions or allegations of any fraud as part of what we did for the audit. Other communications you should know about, as I mentioned earlier, we've issued an unmodified opinion, which used to be called a clean opinion on the district's finances, saying that we believe these financial statements materially represent your financial results for the year. Again, we didn't do a full internal control audit, but in relation to what we are required to do as your external auditor, we reviewed those within the context of the overall audit, and we were satisfied with the controls that we examined. These financial statements include a lot of judgment and accounting estimates. They have to, because not everything is crystal clear as of June 30th of any particular year. Management has to make a lot of estimates on both revenues and expenses. They've done that. We've reviewed the more significant estimates, and we believe that those estimates were booked appropriately. While we made some audit adjustments, there weren't that many of them, which is a good thing. And when we say no uncorrected adjustments, all we can do is propose adjustments to management. They have to decide whether to accept them. If they decide not to accept them, then we have other things that we have to do as auditors. But any adjustments that we proposed, management accepted. So everything that we said was booked by the school district. Management also has to put together a management discussion and analysis, and we make sure that that information is consistent with what is reported in the rest of the financial statement. As we indicated to you, we did not encounter any difficulties in dealing with management as part of the audit. We did not have any disagreements with the management team here. The audit went very smoothly. And we have to know whether you're in contact with any other audit firms, basically. So other than the internal auditors who you have to deal with, we were advised that no other accountants or auditors were contacted. And of course, as your independent auditor, we must be independent, and there's some definitions for that. And we attest to you that we are independent with respect to the school district. So with that, on page 5 of the slide, we've summarized the financial results of operations of your general fund for the year ended June 30, 2015. And again, more detail of this appears in the actual financial statements, and that information is on page 61 of the financial statement. This is information summarized from that page. So you could see that if we take a look at the first column is the original budget. That's the budget that was approved by the voters for your operations for the 14-15 fiscal year, only as adjusted by amounts for what we call encumbrances from the previous year, purchase orders that carried over into this fiscal year. So your total revenues estimated for the budget were about $217.6 million, mostly in the form of either property taxes, STAR money that comes into the district, or regular state aid apportionment from New York State. That's what makes up the majority of your revenue sources. And then you have expenditures that were originally estimated, as you can see, at about $224.5 million. And again, that is obviously in a variety of categories, administrative type categories, operational categories, salaries for teachers, benefits for employees, all these different expenditures, debt service obligations, those kinds of things. Then you keep moving down that first column. There was some money budgeted for monies coming back to the district from some insurance recoveries. And then there were transfers out. The district operates a couple of other funds besides the general fund, particularly a special aid fund and a capital projects fund. And some of this transfer out money is money moved from your operating budget to fund the special aid fund projects, because certain federal and state projects have a local match required of them. So you move over your match money. Or it's money that's going over to the capital projects fund to do capital projects. So when you come down to the bottom of that first column, you see a negative $9.8 million. And that is because this budget technically was adopted and it was not in balance. Revenue expenditures were budgeted to be more than the revenues you were going to take in. You're not allowed to do that in New York State. So what you are allowed to do is take money from your savings account, your fund balance, to balance your spending plan. And that's what the bottom line $9.8 million represent. You took money from your savings account that you had built up from prior years and said, we will use our savings account to balance our plan. The second column is the final budget. So as you move through the year, changes are made to the budget. You had a small budgeted increase in revenues by up to $218.4 million, under $1 million change there. Some of that, or most of that, had to do with the district, and several other districts in the state received a settlement from Microsoft this year through the state, and monies flowed to the district, and you were able to use it for technological enhancements. Your expenditure budget was also increased from the original of $224 million to about $226 million. Again, most of that has to do with some certiorari appropriations, a fund balance to pay tax certiorari claims, to amend the budget to fund those technological advances from the settlement from Microsoft. And then the rest of that column comes down. So when you get to the bottom of the second column, you see a negative $10.6 million. So again, you plan on spending $10.6 million more than your revenue sources. But again, you had fund balance previously accumulated, and that's what your plan was to balance your spending. So when you get to the third column, it's what actually happened. And you have some good news this year. Your actual revenues came in at $221 million, or about $2.6 million more than your plan. So that's always a good thing, about 1% better on the revenue side of the budget. And on the expenditure side of the budget, you spent less than what you had planned to spend. You monitored the budget, and spending came in less than you anticipated by almost $9 million, about 4% of the overall budget. So that's good news. So overall, basically, when you look to the third number up from the bottom in the actual column, you actually added about $2.4 million to your overall. I didn't know there was music coming. So you added, as you can see, about $2.4 million to your fund balance. That's the good news. And from a budgetary point of view, whereas I said in the second column, you thought your fund balance would diminish by $10.6 million. If everything came in according to plan, revenues and expenses, your fund balance would have gone down $10.6 million. So not only did it not go down $10.6 million, you actually added $2.4 million. So from a variance point of view, you see about a $12 million variance. So that's what we call a budget surplus. At about a $12 million budget surplus for this year. And I'll explain to you what you did with some of those funds. So, but actual dollars, revenues over expenses, were actually $2.4 million. You started with fund balance, as you could see, of about $31.8 million to start the year, so you ended the year with $34.3 million. If you go to the next page, this is what you did with the fund balance, and we've put together a comparison with the prior fiscal year. And you see the $34 million is at the bottom of the first column. You have a portion, your fund balance is broken up into different pots. It's not just one pot of $34 million. You're required to put monies aside in different pots. And what the district has done in the first group, that's called restricted fund balance, that totals $16.7 million, or almost half of the total fund balance. These are amounts restricted by general municipal law or education law, but with approval of the Board of Education. So none of these things can be done without a Board of Education approval, but they're done in accordance with either education or general municipal law. You have now $5 million set aside for tax certiorari claims. And I've been doing the audit here for many years, and there was a time where there was no money in that certiorari reserve, and whenever certiorari claims hit, tax refunds hit, you had to go out and borrow money and incur interest costs to pay those obligations. You now have your own savings account to pay these obligations as they come up. So that's a good, that's a good thing and a bad thing, of course. You have about $1.7 million set aside for employee benefit accrued liability. This is vacation and sick time that would be owed to employees should they leave. Again, this is a pot to pull monies from if amounts in one year exceeded what you maybe had budgeted to pay out these payments. This year, you also, by board resolution, established a $3 million retirement system contribution reserve. That's under general municipal law. It's to set aside money to pay your employee retirement system bills. So again, this is a pot that you'll be able to draw from in future years if the retirement billing rates happen to increase and you need some help funding those costs. The next big item is debt service, $5.6 million. It's down from last year. This was a pot of fund balance that was established a couple of years ago, and this was basically set up at the time, as I mentioned earlier, the district used to have a lot of tax certiorari borrowings to pay your bills, and at the time when some monies were accumulated, you set aside money. So now each year, as you have to make payments on these old tax certiorari borrowings, this old debt, you're not taxing the residents any additional money for that portion of the bond payments. So this money is coming from this pot, and you're going to draw down from it each year until you've paid off those old tax certiorari bonds. No new additional taxing is needed to pay that debt service. And then there's money in a workers' comp reserve, obviously set aside to use for workers' comp claims. So that's $16 million of total restricted fund balance. Then you have what's assigned fund balance. Purchases on order or encumbrances account for about $766,000 of the fund balance, and most of those items probably have already been paid for in the current year. And then the very key number is this subsequent year's expenditure line, just over $2 million. And if you compare it to the prior year, it was $9.7 million. So in the prior year, remember I said, your budget was out of balance by about $9.7 million. You said, I'm going to use my savings account to balance our plan. You were able to reduce the reliance on your savings account down to $2 million. And that's key, because obviously even in your own household budgets, you could spend more than you take in if you have a savings account for a little while, but eventually that won't work anymore. So you've relied less on taking money from fund balance. So if during this year you could have results where you save either more than $2 million on the spending side of the budget, or your revenues come in better than you budgeted. Every dollar above $2,044,000 will add to your fund balance. So $2 million is kind of your starting point. You have to get to that amount of savings or revenue enhancements, and then once you reach that, you're good to go. So overall, the good news is the last number, the unassigned fund balance of $14.7 million. That's your unassigned fund balance. That's your free and clear fund balance. That's both good news and a little bad news, because New York State allows you to maintain fund balance in that category at 4% of your budget. With $14 million in there, you are over that amount by about $5.5 million. So that's the good news. You're actually in a good financial position. In discussions with management, as we went through this process, there's already a plan in place to apply some of these excess resources in the current fiscal year in 15-16. And they could talk to you more about that. So overall, it's a very good financial position to be in, compared to maybe where the district, stood financially, 5 or 6 or 7 years ago. Just to conclude the PowerPoint with just some other things that are in here, there's a tab here on other post-employment benefits. This is an actuarial calculation of the present value of your future health insurance obligations as they stand right now. And that number is reflected not in any of the numbers I just talked to you, but it's required to be in the financial statement. And there's a $54 million obligation for that in your financial statements on another page of the financial. On slide 8, I just wanted to bring up this year that this was the first time we had a report under the provisions of GASB Statement 68, which was new pension reporting standards. A very serious standard. It was a lot of additional work to get this information into your financial statement. There's about 6 or 7 pages of note disclosure in your financial statements on this. If you need to fall asleep, you can read those 6, 7 pages. But the key thing to note on here is the third bullet, that as of the measurement date that they did of March 31st, 2015 for the employees' retirement system, the state is showing a $3.3 billion pension liability. In other words, the assets of the plan compared to what they've calculated as the liabilities are $3.3 billion short. But the plan itself is actually about 95% funded, and I'm sure if you compare it to New Jersey, it's much better. You had to pick up your proportion of that $3.3 billion shortfall. On the flip side, on the fourth bullet, the teachers' retirement system, and this was measured as of June 14, was showing an $11 billion asset, which is a good thing, and you got to pick up your proportion of that of $67 million in your financial statements. Not in the general fund, in another statement. So I think that's an important thing. But both TRS and ERS have announced that they're lowering what they call their discount rate, and that's really the key thing that's in all the note disclosure on this. The ERS had been at an 8% discount rate when the financial crisis began. The state comptroller lowered that discount rate over the last 5 years to 7.5%, and he just announced he's lowering it again to 7%. The key with the discount rate is the lower the discount rate, that means they're assuming less growth in their investments in the pension fund. And if they assume less growth, but they need a certain amount of growth in order to make pension payments, guess where they're going to get the extra money from? They're going to get it from you folks and all of us. But the more important thing for you as a school district is the teachers' retirement system. They've continued to use an 8% discount rate. So whereas the ERS had dropped it to 7.5 and it's going to 7, they stayed at 8%. They've just announced that they are lowering it to 7.5%. That's going to have an impact going forward, even though they've tentatively announced another drop in their rates potentially for next year. Most likely that may put the brakes on that going forward, and most likely, if anything, it may stop that decrease and potentially lead to an increase in rates. That's what's important for you folks, because obviously you're budgeting that, and that's a key budgetary item. So certainly keep a lookout for that. So again, as I said earlier in my commentary, auditors are required to communicate one of these 3 type of things in our communications with you. Again, We did not note any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies, the first two items. We did identify some what we call control deficiencies, and some of those are listed, as you can see on page 10 of the slide. Again, no material weaknesses that we identified, no significant deficiencies, some minor control deficiencies. Extra classroom activities on page 10. You know, extra classroom activities have to be reported in your financial statements, but they're not really under the control of the business office. They're in the hands of the various middle and high schools. So we had some issues with some timeliness of deposits and other supporting documentation for some disbursements they made. As I pointed out a couple of minutes ago, the unassigned fund balance exceeds the 4% limit allowed by New York State by $5.5 million, and there is a plan to utilize some of those funds in the upcoming year. And we also noted a large fund balance in the school lunch fund. They basically recommend that you're supposed to have about 3 months of operating expense and fund balance. You're over that by a couple of $100,000. And again, management has a plan, I believe, to upgrade some, lunch equipment. So just so you understand where we are with filing, on page 11, the audit report is due up to Albany by October 15th. We, on your behalf, send a copy of the report up to Albany to stop the clock. So otherwise, if we didn't do that and we waited for this meeting, the superintendent and the board president would have received a friendly reminder from New York State to send in an audit report. So that's why you did not get, hopefully, any of that communication. They do allow a 30-day grace period after October 15th, but if you don't file an audit report with them by November 15th, they will hold state aid in December. That did happen in this district many years ago. And obviously that causes cash flow issues and other issues. So that was not an issue. And then, of course, with tonight, you're supposed to adopt a resolution accepting the audit report and submitting it yourselves up to Albany. So with that, that's all I had, and I would be glad to take any comments or questions.
I just looked, well, one thing I noted is that I believe in the report last year, we had the same issue with the extracurricular activities.
deficiencies.
Yeah, is that's probably pretty normal for school districts?
Pretty standard.
Okay.
So
Yes.
minor.
It's such a de minimis amount.
Well, if you look at the actual extra classroom report, the issue, and the reason we focus actually probably a disproportionate amount of our audit time on the extra classroom, is that between all the school buildings, there's almost $300,000 that goes in and out each year. And in a lot of cases, probably a lot of that is cash.
Right.
It's not like the business office where everything's getting wired and stuff like that. And it's not being handled by the business office, so, we get concerned about controls, especially when a lot of cash is involved.
I think we should congratulate our financial department on doing a great job of managing the budget this year and coming in under budget while delivering more services to our students. I think it's a great job. Thank you.
Yep.
I just had a question, and I don't know if this is probably for administration, and honestly, I don't remember if this was during my tenure or before my tenure, but where did we come up with the $3 million retirement system fund number? Where did that $3 million number, why isn't it higher?
That's where you can. The restricted.
So we
Are there
said
limits on how we can use that?
we can use that to offset increases in the employee retirement system. Scott did indicate that discount rate went from 8 to 7.5, and it's going to 7, and we anticipated that this would happen a number of months ago, and that's why we set this up. We're not allowed to set it up for TRS. We set it up for ERS.
Correct.
And we will use any increase in the fund will come out of that reserve in next year's budget. So there'll be no effect on the taxpayer for a number of years. We've got enough to cover increases for years to come from that $3 million.
Right, I was just curious, how do you calculate that number? Why isn't it $1 million or $5 million? Or
I think that we're
are you
trying to
trying
predict
to
what
go
could
out a
happen.
certain X
Yes,
number of
we're
years?
trying to go out at least 5 years
At least 5 years, okay.
to cover any increases. And we thought that by that time, it would certainly be stable and we wouldn't need any more. Some of these are calculated by the year. Some of them, like the certiorari reserve that the board just voted on, is based on prior experience with things that happened to us, so to be prepared for it. So there's a number of things that Scott referred to and that you've heard before from me that we have covered going into many years going forward, no matter what happens with the rates.
Thanks. Do we want to do the audit committee presentation now? Just roll right into it. Can you bring those slides up? Do you have that? Yeah. So just like last year, the audit committee pulled together just a few slides to highlight some portions of the audit for you. First of all, we'd like to thank O'Connor Davies on their job with this audit. And we're also happy to find that there's been no significant deficiencies or material weaknesses with this past year's audit. We do note that, again, you're right, Trustee Miller, the same issues come up with extracurricular activities. And I think we'd said within the last several months that we have to, one, make sure that for elementary schools that this is not something that we're continuing for elementary schools. We actually shouldn't have these type of activities that show a transfer of cash in the elementary school, so we just need to enforce that. The committee does recommend that we accept the audited financial statement presented by O'Connor Davies. If we can go to slide 3, just a few highlights from this year's audit. One thing we wanted to note for the board was that pre-bond spending has a potential impact on the budget. So the audit committee does caution the board that pre-bond spending will impact the budget should the board decide not to proceed with a bond, or should the community not pass the bond. We'll have to keep in mind our spending as we go forth. And we've talked about that a number of times, but I really wanted to put that on record so that everyone is focused on it. Whatever spending we're doing now that doesn't go into, it doesn't result in a bond, we'll have to pick that up in this year's budget. A good thing that's happened over the last couple of years that we've seen is a stability in key management positions. Management control functions have been impacted for a number of years in this district as a result of vacancies in key management positions. The fact that we've now filled these positions and have had individuals in these seats for the last year or two has really turned around what was really a downhill slope with regards to how the district was being run, especially from the business office perspective. Lastly, excess funds. We talked about this briefly, but we have approximately $5.6 million beyond the state-allowed maximum fund balance. Scott mentioned that the initial recommendation by administration was for these funds to be used to offset certiorari judgments and tax increases for the prospective bond. The board has already, and just a highlight, I think we did that maybe a month or two ago, I can't remember the date, but the board has already voted to allow a reserve of $2.5 million of these monies for certiorari purposes. So we still have a bit more to go, but that's already been addressed. And finally, what we've already talked about tonight is we need to think about future healthcare costs, teacher retirement increases, and judgments for tax refunds. We really need to come up with a long-term solution of addressing these. But again, I think we need buy-in from the state as well as looking at what other communities are doing to address these issues. Ken, do you want to add anything?
I just want to add one thing. The resolution to accept this audit will be on next week's agenda.
Next meetings, you mean?
Next meeting is next week.
Oh, that is next week, that's right, next Tuesday.
We're going to talk about that, too.
All right.
Nice job.
Thanks.
Good job, Trustee Farrell.
Good.
Good job.
Audit is so much fun. Thanks, Scott.
Is that it? Any other questions? Questions from the board?
My report? Okay. A couple of things. Good evening, everyone, first of all. First of all, I need to congratulate Dr. Ning for winning the MSA 2015 Library Grant. I received a check in the mail for $250. Unfortunately, Dr. Ning is addressed to the district, not to you. So thank you for
gladly
that.
accept for the district. Thank you.
Thank you. And while we're on the subject of the December 1st meeting, that meeting is actually scheduled for next week, essentially, which means that our agenda items would need to go out by Wednesday, which we are not prepared to do. However, there is a personnel matter that will need some attention on the 1st. So I wanted to poll the board and see if there would be any way we could either have an early morning meeting just for that action item that the attorneys need to get resolved, and not have the evening meeting, if that's an option. We need a quorum to address, and, yeah, we need a quorum to
So-
address that matter.
Sorry, when would we approve
Scheduled
the
for the
audit?
The audit would be, Ken, is there a deadline by which we have to do that? So we could do that on
A later date, right?
The next meeting?
the next meeting is December 16th.
All right, close enough.
So,
You need a morning meeting on the 1st?
For that one, we could do it in the evening if you want, but that would be the only item on the 1st. Meeting would probably take about 15 minutes.
6:30? Say at 6:30
Oh,
PM.
PM.
I could do 6:30 a.m., I can't do 6:30 p.m.
Would it be possible to poll the board for a 8 o'clock meeting on the 1st?
And
If
I'll
I can
do
get
it.
5 people?
I'm present, I can.
I can.
2?
You could do 7:30, but not 8.
Leslie put his hand up.
8 a.m.
8 a.m.?
Is that 3?
I cannot commit to that.
Omar?
It's Tuesday,
Tuesday the 1st.
8, 6:30 or 8 a.m.
I'm not sure yet. I have at 8:30, I would try to move. I have at 8 o'clock, actually.
Sounds like
but
we
I
have a
need to
quorum.
move.
Yeah, I think we can do it.
Okay.
So
Okay.
8 a.m.?
That works for you, Gus? Okay, very good. Thank you very much for that. Also, just when we do get to the consent agenda, there is one item that's just been updated. That's item 11.1. We just added language that says, subject to a mutually acceptable agreement, because that contract is not ready yet. And lastly, on the
11 what?
11.1, that's regarding DataNet.
Okay.
And lastly, on the superintendent's report, I'd just like to open the discussion, if I can, regarding the bond. Last week, we had a discussion about some items we were going to put on this agenda. And after speaking with some board members in preparation for this meeting, I sensed that there may have been some slight trepidation that led me to remove that item, not at all to suggest that folks did not support the bond. That was not the indication that I got at all. It was simply a matter of giving the opportunity, because there was some concern about the amount of time that the RFP for the architects related to the bond, the amount of time that people had to respond to that. So there was some question about how do we ensure that we get full community confidence in the process. So I suggested that perhaps we consider putting the RFP out again for a longer period of time to see if there are other firms that would be interested in submitting. And the only thing we would have to lose, other than time, would be nothing. We would have the opportunity to gain greater community confidence in the process. So in actuality, what I probably should have done was not move it from the agenda altogether, but just move it from the consent agenda. But ultimately, I think a bond of this size and something that is so important to the community, it really needs to be supported by the full board unanimously. So I did make the decision to put that off and open it up for discussion to see if it is the desire of the board, the full board, to move forward with putting the RFP out again, just to see if there's any other interests and move forward at that time, once we got that information. Now, what would that timeline look like? If we were to extend this, yes, please, Ken. If we were to extend this for another month, if we put the RFP out and extended it to December 23rd, that would give us essentially a full month to find out if there were other architects interested in submitting. And for the record, we should also note that there's nothing outside the ordinary in terms of the amount of time that this RFP has been out. All of our RFPs have historically gone out for 5 days, so there was no exception to this. And I just needed to say that publicly because I did not want there to be a perception that there was anything done outside of the ordinary as it relates to this RFP. But if we were to be able to get this RFP out and have a return date of Friday the 18th, we could get the architects appointed by the January 5th meeting, and all the resolutions associated with that would be approved at that particular meeting, and then we would ask the public to vote on the bond in March. So in putting this recommendation together, of course, we looked at the calendar to determine whether or not it made sense to put it in May with the general budget. Well, we have to rule May out because if the bond goes down, if it is not supported, then that impacts the general budget. Putting them out at the same time obviously does not give us the opportunity to do that. Putting it out in April, I think, is too close to ask people to come out in April and then come back out in May. February is an option, but I think it is, given the options available to us, I think March would make the most sense in terms of the timetable that we have. So I'd like to, with the permission of the board, to open this up for discussion and get your sense of whether or not this idea of putting the RFP out again makes sense, and if there are any, if there's any further trepidation to that proposal.
Can I ask just a preliminary question? If we, whatever date we select for voting on the bond, can someone remind me if it fails to pass, how much time before we can propose a revised version of the bond? Is it a week later? Is it a month later? Is there a rule for the timeline? 30 days.
But
So
that
I-
would put us right up against our,
I know, so I'm just saying, whatever we decide to do in terms of timeline, we all want this to pass, and I think we should give ourselves at least enough time
To give it
to
another
make a
shot.
revised shot if it doesn't work the first time.
March would give us the opportunity to do that,
Yeah.
with that March timetable.
And my question has to do with, we've been at this since around May
Correct.
of last year. We've been at this. And the notion of putting another RFP out for an architect would gain us what outside of just putting out another RFP? Because by putting out an RFP, what we're indefinitely saying is that, especially as the superintendent, and I don't want to speak for you, but from my observation, is saying that we did not do it right the first time. There's always going to be opposition. And just because there's opposition, that does not necessarily mean we change course. And I think that when you look at the history, and I'm glad you noted to that because I've been asking that question of what is the typical timeline, have our RFPs been, regardless to what the RFPs are in the district, whether they're architectural work, whether they're food service work, whether they're nursing work, what does that timeline look like? And the typical standard for Mount Vernon City School District, because there is no guidelines by law, and I would forward that to council, there are no guidelines by law for the amount of time any school district is to put out an RFP. So for Mount Vernon standards, Mount Vernon standard is a minimum 5-day period. So this was not outside the norm as you spoke to. So my question is, why will we argue with ourselves about our own standard in putting out a new RFP? My second question would be, what is the financial impact for switching, if we did get another architectural firm, what is the financial impact to the district from a budgetary standpoint of going after a new architect? And then I guess we can continue.
And I'll answer your first question, and I'll allow Mr. Silver to get to the second part of your question. The first part of the question is, what is the message that's associated with putting the RFP out? Are we saying that we did something wrong? No, but from my perspective in conversations with some board members, as far as I'm concerned, I think you're 100% correct in that there will always be folks in the community who will take exception to whatever decision we make. However, I don't need that exception coming from the board. A bond of this size needs to be unanimous by this board, and so that when we go out into the community and when we meet whatever opposition there may be, the board will be able to speak with one voice. If 1 or 2 or 3 board members have any trepidation about the process from their constituents or for whatever the catalyst of their concerns may be, I think that puts us in a compromised position. So that's what I think the benefit of putting it out there again. And I think that the having the full board confidence is essential to the successful passage of this bond.
Absolutely, and
I,
and
I,
Go ahead, Dr. Meany.
yeah, I think you said it right, the process. It's the process. It's all about the process because if the process is done right, even by our standards, which, by the way, if it's 5 days, it needs to change because we need to change that process and give it at least a month. 5 days RFP for $100 million bond. Just think about
RFP is
having...
not for a $100 million bond. Let's not confuse the community. It's not for a $100 million
No,
bond.
because you are asking firms out there to prepare a plan to respond to how they're going to be implementing a program that's worth $100 million. So, and you give them only 5 days? That's the problem. So regardless, and it's by our standards, by the way, so nothing has been done wrong, but we don't feel comfortable with it. The community does not feel comfortable with it. Therefore, we need to make a change. We need to make a change with that standard. This is a policy matter. Maybe the policy committee should really look into this on how, what it is. And, and again, we need everybody to buy into this. If there is one board member who feels that, you know what, I can't go with this, then we're exposing ourselves out there, not just to criticism, but to, the bond may still pass, but it's much better if we all, as a board, unanimously come and vote for it. And that's the problem. The problem isn't like we're pointing fingers. There is no pointing finger at anyone. It's just a process. When you go, sometimes you make a decision here, because we all spoke about it and said, let's go ahead with it. But you go back and then start thinking, and you start putting pieces together in terms of, what, does that really make sense? Why do we have to hurry? And then you talk about it, then you come with the circumstance. You say, you know what, it would be best if we do it right, invite others the right way. That way, we'll all go with it, because I'm sure you want to go with this bond. We all do want to go. But the process needs to be done.
And that's why I keep emphasizing that we've been in the process since May. This has not been a hurried process. We've been working at this, and we've been dealing with this. And what happens is board members continue to go back into the community, and they continue to have the community conversations, and then they keep coming back being double-minded about things. Because just at the end of the last board meeting, we had the discussion. We discussed about what direction we want to go in. We made a informal decision about the direction we wanted to go in, and then board members go back into the community, and then they come back with a changed decision. And that's what cannot continue to happen. When we make a decision here as a board, it should be based upon our discussion for the direction of this district, and not based upon the discussions that we go back and have in the community. While I respect the community's input, and we bring the community's input into our vision and into our thinking, but when we make decisions here as a board, and then you constantly come back and change it. We've sat in this board meeting and we saw how many presentations as it related to the bond size, as it related to what was included in the bond, and we all agreed with moving forward at each stage, at each point. And then we go back into the community and we come back with a revised vision and a revised thinking, which cannot take place. That is the problem that I'm having. I'm all for oversight. I'm all for process. But when we're following the process and we're trying to work with the board members that do have issues, I want to respect each and every board member's issue at this table. But when we're working through it as a team, and then we go into the community and come back with a changed mind based upon the conversations we had with other constituents, that's what causes the bumps in the road. We've been asking, the superintendent's been asking, and we've been meeting at the end of each board meeting, are we comfortable with this process? Are we comfortable with this point? Is this the direction we would like to go in? And every board member up to this point has agreed with that notion. And then what happens is we leave, and by the time we get back to the next meeting, there's a whole new thought process, and that's inconsistency.
Well, what's wrong with that? Talking
It's
to
inconsistency.
No, wait.
The issue is,
Talking
we have to get to an end here, right?
Yes,
We have
we
to
do.
present a bond.
Right.
So I personally, I want this bond to pass.
Mm-hmm.
I think all 9 of us, and 10 of us, including the administration, we want and need these improvements in our district.
Yes.
It's the best thing. We all agree. We all agree we need it. We all agree on the vision and the general scope of what's going to happen. The actual exact dollar amount might go up a little bit, might go down a little bit. We'll have to figure that out. But there's no disagreement in the vision. So the question is, right, there's no disagreement. So the question is, how do we get there?
Exactly.
Right? So if we have issue, I don't really care about the past. All I care about is the future. And if we have an issue that's come up that stopped us for this week or whatever from moving forward, that's fine. Let's deal with it. But what is our game plan if we pick a date that we're going to present this bond to the community? We need to know that's the date. And we need to get all the issues out on the table right now.
We can't change our mind.
And we can't keep postponing it, because that sends a message of weakness and inconsistency.
And we've put
Yes.
timetables together, and we're working through the timetables, and we're working through the issues, and for one reason or another, we keep going back to stuff that we've already surpassed board meetings ago. And I'm trying to really curb what I say and how I say it, but I think it's very, very important that our priorities be correct, because we must consider the children, the impact that it's going to have to our students, and what this bond would stand for. You know, and I'm not hearing a lot of conversation around that. I'm hearing conversation around changing an RFP, which went through its proper process, because then if we're changing it, what we're saying is that it didn't go through its proper process, in my opinion. By saying that we need to change it and put out a new RFP, what we're saying to ourselves as a board, for those of us that agree that we should go out for another RFP, is that the RFP originally didn't go out with the proper process or time, and you can have that opinion. That we all have differences of opinion, but that's what you're saying in essence, and that's the focus at this present moment. It's changing the RFP for an architect because you feel that it didn't follow the proper process. And what I'm saying is that it went through the standard process, and we've all been asking at the stages of going through, are we in agreement? Are we okay? Once again, and every time we come back with a different thinking, and we can't continue to do that. We got to be solid, as Trustee Micah said, come up with a plan, stick to the plan, go through the bumps in the road that's going to occur. As you said, this is a large bond. There's a lot of things that's going to take place that we're going to be abreast of, but we need to be talking about the continued process. How do we bring all of the companies together to ensure everybody is working together as a committee, so everybody knows which work is being done, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, instead of focus on this, what I consider to be the smallest part. We were focusing on oversight, and now we're moving backwards from oversight to initial sight.
I have a question. I guess my question is, and I agree with, first of all, I'm agnostic about who does the work. I really don't care, which architectural firm, as long as they're competent and have been thoroughly vetted and have worked in school districts before and can give us references. It doesn't matter to me. What matters to me is being able to deliver on the educational vision for our students and for the community. But I do, in thinking about what Trustee McGowan's saying, is that, so what happens if by the 18th only Fuller and D'Angelo comes back to us?
That's a good question.
Are we going to stick with them? Or are we going to say that's not satisfactory? Because my feeling, the undercurrent that I'm getting is that people don't want Fuller and D'Angelo. I'm just putting it out there, guys, because it's the elephant.
I'm sorry to interrupt, I apologize.
Can't say that.
But I recommend that if we're going to continue this discussion, we do it in executive session. The board doesn't have to do that, but that's my recommendation
Okay.
based on the direction the discussion is going.
Well, anyway, how do we get to an end point? How are we going to determine after the 18th, when everything's in, how are we going to determine how we make the decision?
The first question I have is, November 24th, this is the advertisement to newspapers. And the prospective architects will get it on December 1st. Is 18 days enough? 18 days enough to get this?
We were actually advised previously, or our council shared with us previously, that architectural firms are accustomed to responding to RFPs like this, firms who have the capacity, and they already have in their repertoire a proposal that would be appropriate to respond. So I think 18, frankly, I think the 5 days was sufficient, but if there needs to be greater confidence, extending it for an extended period of time, I don't see the harm in doing that. I do recognize what Trustee McDowell is saying, however, in terms of consistency, because quite frankly, we had what we thought were our marching orders from our last meeting, and we were marching to that beat, and the tune kind of changed midstream, which puts us in a compromised position. But to answer your question, I think that is ample time for a firm that is accustomed to responding to this kind of RFP and to have the manpower and capacity to fulfill the RFP. I think they will be prepared. Is that a fair summary of Mrs. Hamlin? It's fair. Thank you.
So-
But I do want to get to Ms. Trustee McDowell's second question that he posed. I'm going to ask Mr. Silva to respond to that.
You want to say that again?
I have
Oh,
some
what's that to
comments.
do with the
What's
cost?
The financial impact of
And the timing impact, I mean, I see something on here about the timing.
The sheet that the board has in front of you, I didn't make enough for the public. Again, we need to vote on the bond in a timely enough fashion so that we can adjust the budget should the bond be defeated, because the budget will be substantially larger if the bond is defeated. There are repairs that we must do next year in next year's budget. If the bond passes, there will be no increase in the budget, there will be no increase from the bond, there will be no increase to anybody for the 16-17 school year. If the bond is defeated, there will be a substantial increase in taxes in the budget.
I'm sorry, Mr. So, can I cut you off for 1 second? I just want to stick to that question as to what is the financial impact for the, if we do not move forward tonight with the resolution for, what is it, for the architect?
Appointment of the architects.
For the appointments of the architect. What is the financial impact from that particular perspective? Because we got to even get to voting as a board on a bond before we can talk about that.
We have a pre-bond fee of $148,500 with Fuller and D'Angelo. We have the schematic design of the Pennington edition of $65,000. And then the biggest thing after that is that we will have to lease the modulars at $72,000 for an extra year. We plan to lease it for the 16-17 year, but we will have to lease it for the 17-18 year because the extension at Pennington will not be ready. So it's those three are the major items. But there's one other item
Just to be clear, that's a repercussion from a 1-month delay right now?
Well, it would be a 2-month delay.
In the vote.
The problem is that we lose the summer. We would not be able to do our work
And
during the
you're saying
summer.
that's if we vote on a bond in March versus January?
Yes.
I understand.
So the State Education Department was going to move us ahead, but even if they did, with a vote in March, we could not get the plans ready for them. We would not be able to do any work during next summer. So we would lose the whole summer. It's possible we could start during the fall, possible.
But just as we are speaking publicly, I just want to respond to something that Mr. Silver said, and then we need to acknowledge Trustee Zamora, who's been trying to comment. We don't know emphatically that the general budget will have a 0% increase. That is our goal, but there are several factors that we don't yet know. So I don't want the public to walk away feeling that we're going out with a 0% increase. But that is where we are, where our plan is. But we don't know state aid, we don't know positions, there's a few things that we don't know yet. So with that said, if it's all right, Madam President, I'd like to acknowledge Mr. Zamora.
Okay, thank you.
Is he muted, Joel?
Hold on, we can't hear you, sir.
Can't hear you, hang on.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Yes.
Oh, fantastic. Couple, okay, I have a little bit of a feedback. Let me step away from the mic a little bit. All right, a couple of things in regards to what Trustee McDowell said. He keeps referring to this And part of my reservations about this entire RFP process is that I kept on mentioning that it felt that district architects had a shoo-in on this process. Well, you know, we already had our own architects dealing with certain parts of the bond before they were even awarded the bond. And we all know that's a fact. It's been in many confidentials and in many meeting notes prior to the September 25th RFP. Number two, an RFP for a nurse or something very simple in the district that usually typically takes 5 days is very different from RFP that deals with a $100 million bond. And I agree with Dr. Ning on that point. The next thing is that I personally cannot be supportive of any bond, no matter what the date is, no matter how long the RFP is, unless we do have an in-house architect and all of our facilities administrators in place to deal with, the rollout of such a bond. Next line is that also in disagreement with Trustee McDowell, I truly believe that we need to have the community buy into this. And so I believe that not having the community support at this juncture is not a smart thing to roll out a bond and say, well, just because us 9 board members agree that we shouldn't listen to the community. The community voted us in. And I, I certainly am not going to disregard their comments and just move forward on a bond when we could simply regroup and have a further discussion in terms of what their concerns are and move forward with their support and with their buy-in. But Trustee McDowell could choose to do whatever he wants. The next thing is that if the bond fails, I understand that taxes will increase, taxes will have to increase, we have to make these repairs. Each repair has a cost, and those costs will be looked at, and the board will approve or disapprove of those repairs at that time. So, just because we're presented $20 million of repairs doesn't mean we're going to approve $20 million of repair that would hence cause a tax increase. So let it be said right now that I will be very weary of any type of expenditures that would significantly change the tax proportion in terms of an increase for any particular budget year. Next, that there is currently right now not a resolution on the table, not that I know of, to vote tonight on moving this bond forward. And I know that Trustee McDowell also brought that up, but I didn't see one. If there is one that I'm unaware of, please, let me know about it. Those are some of my comments.
Okay.
So my question is, my question is about the delay and what I was thinking about over the weekend when I was shocked to hear that, quote, the bond is off the table. I didn't hear it. I heard it in a document. No one called me or told me. But, and we presented this to the community 2 weeks ago, that we were going forward with this. So it was a little shocking and made me feel like, God, we're really not going to look so good with this. But be that as it may, we have to work as a team. But my question is there a way, and I know we're talking about the size of the bond and the 5-day thing and everything, is there a way that we could, and I know I brought this up before and no one agreed with me, but I'm going to bring it up again, to try to get something accomplished next summer? Like, we voted a year and a half ago to do K-8. We didn't even implement that with fidelity because no one put in the budget for the labs, for the science labs, et cetera, et cetera. We didn't have a plan. We had to get modulars. We didn't have time to build anything. So what I was thinking about over the weekend was, could we possibly break this bond into 2 parts and agree to maybe put out a new RFP for another architect, a possible different architect, or the same architect, whatever the numbers look like or whatever, for the high school part, which is a really much bigger part. I mean, of the bond. But so could we at least put out a bond? I'm just floating this out there for discussion. Could we put out a bond that doesn't, for January, could we agree to do something that would just start with the priorities, which is, let's say, finishing K-8 instead of having to wait like 3 years from when we said we're going to implement it, making the community wait, couldn't we do that and at least get K-8 done with fidelity on the timeline, get the work done next summer, and maybe even get the pre-K. I don't know if we can do, and then, but also make sure we get these repairs done, whether, Trustee Zamora, I totally get what you're saying, whether it's 20 million, 15 million, or 40 million, but getting them done without an impact to taxpayers and without an impact on our programs, which I think we all agreed that if we were going to introduce new programs like Performing Arts and Gifted and Talented, we were going to make sure that they were sustainable so that we were able to continue with the programs that we started to offer our children. So my suggestion is maybe there's a compromise, because we do have a tremendous amount, we have had a tremendous amount of momentum with the board, and we have momentum in the community and excitement in the community. Is there a way we could do something and then work on the second part later? Because we all agreed it's a tremendous amount to do. The other thing is, I don't understand how not being able to do work next summer or a lot of work next year, how does that impact the Smart School Bond money? Because I know we're getting access to that money, but we can't utilize that money if we don't know what our plan is, right? So we've already submitted some plans for how that's going to be utilized in infrastructure, but you can't really do infrastructure work until we do the wiring work. And we can't do the wiring work until we know what the plan is. So I'm just saying that I feel like if we could move forward on some front and deliver something to the community that we've promised them, it would be by the fall of 17 or 16, that would be a better thing. And what I said earlier, and I know it wasn't really a popular idea, but if we could do a $60 million bond and demonstrate to the public with an architect on board, whatever, whatever the oversight we agree we need, couldn't we demonstrate to the community that we are a different administration? We're a responsible administration. We delivered the budget, our budget for last year under budget. We saved money and we delivered more. So maybe we could earn the trust that way and go out with a second bond, and whoever gets it, fine. But what I've seen in this community, in the short time I've been on the school board involved with the schools, is that we keep stop, start, stop, start, stop, start, and at the end of the day, we don't get anything done. So I'm just saying, on the K-8 thing, it was something that was hugely important to the community. According to what I heard the community was saying, we're not even going to get to that. So, I'm just throwing that out there as a thought about how could we continue to move forward.
I think that the K-8 was the community
I
was
have a
excited
comment.
about the K-8 was, the community was excited about the K-8, and they also were excited about the vocational programs. And they're also, so we need to decide if we're going to do one thing or the other.
Well, we've
So-
got the
and
vocational
then if we-
programs going.
And then if we do K-8, then what schools are we going to do them?
We said we were going to do all schools. That
So-
was the vision we all approved 2 weeks
Let's
ago.
just do the whole thing. Let's just, why stop at 60 million? Let's just do,
Okay.
we'll do the whole.
any of us are against
No, we're not against the bond.
No, I'm just trying to keep things moving and not have to,
I-
not have to make any tough choices in the spring. I mean, we always have to make tough choices with budget, but I'm just saying, I don't want to have to increase taxes.
I think the community will thank us for really taking these steps, and I believe so. I think we're getting also back too negative to what we've achieved in the, for 3 years or even 4 or 5 years. Just look at this presentation of the budget, the audit report. This district have moved beyond.
Oh, yeah.
Greatly. So we have to recognize that. We have to build on the positive. Just getting a bump on the road, just to make sure that we have the safeguard, the safety nets, everything that needed for spending another $100 million bond, which was done just a few years ago, with no oversight. Where is that administration? Where are those board members? They acted just like you are describing. They just go and say, let's do it, or we need this oversight. We need to take our time. I agree, and we need this process to be so respected, right, so that when we do this, the community will come and join us. So the next 5 years, when none of us here, maybe only the administrators, they will realize that, something great has been done. you know. So that's all we want. We all agree. I'm so passionate about this bond, by the way.
Yeah.
You know, we brought Dr. Hamilton here for this.
Okay.
You know, and he agreed. He bought into this plan. I understand your frustration, you know, but we have to take into account what the community says. Don't tell me today that we cannot go out there and talk to them. Every day, Trustee McDowell, you come here and talk to us about, oh, the community is this, they're acting this, they're suggesting this. Come on, and today you're telling us not to listen to them?
Nobody said that, so please.
No,
don't-
that's
don't-
what you
don't-
said.
don't put that in my-
No, that's what you said. You said,
not to talk.
and you made a further, a better accusation by saying, you guys, you go and talk to these members, the community, as if we had this, you know, dark club that just come out and goes out after. No, it's not that.
All right.
You know, what we do, yes, you know, I'm just so,
I know.
let's
I'm just as
be
passionate.
very positive about this.
I am trying to be
Let's respect this, you know, this timeline, and move forward. You know, this will be done.
So what was wrong with the prior timeline that we put? This is what I'm saying, Dr. Ng, about the inconsistencies. Is
Because-
that we had a timeline in place. It's not like we're just now putting a timeline in place. We had a timeline in place. The second thing is, I'm hearing board members saying that the community is saying, I've been to every community presentation that the superintendent has done, and I've never seen half the board members that's sitting at this table there. So I've heard what the community is saying. And for one, the community is excited and ecstatic about the presentation that the superintendent has put together. I've not heard one community member ask about an architect.
Omar, I think,
I'm sorry, I have not heard one, at none of the board, the budget presentation, the bond presentation meetings that I've been to, I've not heard one community member ask about an architect.
okay.
So I just want to know that, where is the community members that you're speaking to? Because I've been at every meeting, every bond meeting up to this point.
Okay.
Whether it was on the north side,
Omar.
whether it was on the south side, and the community is excited and they're ready. Are they concerned about oversight? Absolutely. Are we concerned about oversight? Absolutely. And we've been having this conversation about how to put this oversight in place. And we've been doing what we said we've been doing to ensure that we have the proper oversight to ensure that the past problems that this district has had doesn't happen as we move forward. My question is being that we are putting these controls in place, why do we keep coming back to the table and changing things? Last meeting, Dr. Ng, all of us sat in the meeting, last board meeting. After this session was over, we went back into executive session to discuss executive session items, and we had a brief discussion about what we agreed upon moving forward as it related to the vision. And we all agreed at the point of where we were, as it related to the timeline, as it related to everything that needed to be on the agenda today. Before this meeting could come to point today, I got a phone call from the superintendent saying that things changed. That's my question. What changed between the last board meeting and this board meeting? And that's what has to stop. I'm all for talking to the community because the community has voted each and every one of us in, and we have a responsibility to the community, not to Dr. Hamilton, not to the administration. We have a responsibility to our students, our families, and this community.
Okay,
And
all right.
and I respect that.
Thank
So,
you, thank you, Omar. All right, let's move on. Let's move on.
I'd like to flesh out, if I
have a
may,
comment.
Trustee Miller's concept, and I just want to make sure I'm understanding, Trustee Miller, what you're proposing, that we float two bonds, take this $105 million and divide it by two, essentially, and put two proposals together, one that could happen on the January timetable, and one that would happen subsequent to that.
Yes, because I'm concerned about momentum, and I'm also concerned about trying to pass a budget that might reflect a tax increase because of two things, because of the money we'll have to absorb on the pre-bond expenses and the modular expense if we go with, if we go with the March timeline. So we're going to have to absorb $300,000 from that, and then we may also have to absorb anywhere from $20 to $50 million of mandatory repairs that keep us in code, in compliance. My understanding is these are critical that have to happen. So I'm trying to avoid that. I don't care who the architect is. I'm just trying to avoid that
I've
happening.
actually thought about that myself, you know, but.
Mr.
it's-
Silver?
Maybe the revenue from the state won't be the same, so maybe you can answer that.
Yeah.
I didn't hear your question.
Darcy's question, and I seconded. I said I thought about that myself, and I wanted to know what the impact would be as far as taxes and what we would get back from the state aid. You know, we were getting 71% back from the $100 million. How would that impact?
The state aid.
If we went out with one bond in January and the second part of that bond, and we could come up with how we package that ultimately, but if we came out with one bond in January and another bond subsequent to that. And then we also need to think about the likelihood of the second one passing as well, assuming the first one does.
Yeah, so
That's
on
another
that,
thing, too.
on that point, we have to be careful that these are distinct items, one not depending upon the other for the second bond to pass. First one passes, second one doesn't, and the second one has a component that's a part of the first, we have a big problem.
That's true.
The
so.
state aid is not related to how often the bond is, when it passes. And remember, the state aid is now 75.5%. It's gone up from 71%.
What was that?
So that's in 16, 17 year, it goes up
Oh,
to.
okay.
Or right away, as soon as we pass a bond, it's 75.5% is our state aid. So that's not affected. A point from before, we did check, and we believe that it's 90 days for a revote, not 30 days for a revote, but we are going to check with bond counsel before we make a definitive statement on it. So I guess it's the budget that's 30 days, but the bond looks like it's 90, but we're going to make sure of that.
Well, if that's 90, then that would put us after.
March.
Right. It would put us after the budget vote.
So let me ask you a question. So my question is, and I think this is also Trustee Saunders' question and Superintendent Hamilton's question is, so we don't, the bond doesn't pass in March, the big bond, the 108, whatever the big McGill is, you know, that doesn't pass. What is the impact on our budget for 16, 17, and what will that mean for, I mean, this to me is the whole thing. It's not about who's the architect, it's not about when the work gets done. I mean, I want to deliver on the promise to the community as quickly as we can, but in a smart way. But what is the impact going to be on the community?
Okay.
But we don't know what our revenue will be, of course. We don't
Right.
know what our state aid will be.
Let's say everything was stayed flat.
We had thought about having a 1.5% increase in the budget.
Right.
And hopefully having sufficient revenues to have no increase in the taxes with having that. That's what we did this year.
Right.
But there is, the architects, along with the building condition survey, are developing a 5-year plan, which has to be submitted to the state of how we are going to do our repairs.
Right.
Has nothing to do with pre-kindergarten or K-8 or the fields, but how we're going to repair our buildings. That number is right now at $49.5 million, which was cut from $144 million in original estimates for needed repairs for the buildings. But let's say it's 49.5. So that will be divided in some way into 5 years and submitted to the state, that's what we are planning to do. You're not required to follow that plan, but that is a plan we have to file with the state of our intention to do this.
Yeah, but what's the impact on the
So-
2016-17
So the
budget?
impact on the budget could be whatever we decide to put in there of repairs. Mr. Zamora has spoken about monitoring or
Sure.
watching the repairs that would be put into the budget to make sure it's not budget busting. But there is a likelihood that if we need a roof and it's a number of $1 million, if we're not doing a bond for it, it becomes a problem. If we want to do certain repairs, I mean, there would be no fields, there would just be repairs would be all we'd be doing.
Mr. Zamore had something else to say, I believe. Leslie?
Yes, a couple comments. Number one, I believe that Trustee Miller makes a good point about breaking up the bond. Originally, I was not for that, but given that I've had a lot of comments from people in the community, maybe not the same people that Trustee McDowell have been speaking to, but they have been concerned about the size of the bond, and that's one thing that I was going to, try to get them to agree upon, but it would be much easier if we did break it up. I have come to realize that myself, and just so a matter of life lessons, that does not bend breaks. So the fact that Trustee McDowell expects all of us to be stern, and once we make a decision, we can't rethink the decision. Only fools do that. I will rethink any decision that I feel needs to be rethought.
Trustee Zamora, let's
The
talk.
next thing is that, we keep talking about the architect, and I can't really keep track of Trustee McDowell's, all his comments, but he says, you said you wanted an architect, we have that, we have all the things. Do we? Do we have an architect in place? An internal architect? I don't believe so. If
Trustee
someone
Zamora.
passed that resolution, let me know.
Trustee
And
Zamora.
then the next thing is that,
Does he have earplugs on?
again, this is something that, we'll make a decision together, on how we move forward, but the fact that Trustee McDowell keeps coming back to,
Trustee
we made a
Zamora.
decision, we made a
Trustee
decision,
Zamora.
how could we change our minds?
Trustee
Let me tell you
Zamora.
something. I will change my mind as often as I feel that it needs to be changed.
Okay.
So, everyone has the right to do whatever they'd like. If Trustee McDowell wants to go out in the community and push the bond and he feels he can do it himself, then please go do so.
Can you mute him? Okay, all right, Leslie, thank you.
He loves me.
Can you hear me?
You're welcome.
Can you hear me?
Trustee Zamora. No, I don't think he can hear you.
Okay.
I don't think he can hear
Can
you.
you?
Thank you, Trustee Zamora.
You're welcome.
Okay. He heard that.
Can I make a
Okay,
comment?
all right, you want to make a comment, then we
Yes.
should move on. I think we need to go in executive
Yes.
session.
Okay, look, guys. We are elected officials. We have constituents. All elected officials, in every capacity, in every country, have a dilemma, right? You have your own opinion, and you have people whom you represent. And there's a balance. And I'm not going to tell anybody what the right balance is. But that's a fact that we all have to deal with. The reality is, we need a bond passed. So I don't really care whether it's this RFP issue, or we do 2 bonds, or 10 bonds, or 1 bond. I don't care. But we have to move forward. So what is the way to move forward? How can we assure that if we do this RFP, great, let's do another RFP, let's make it 60 days. I don't care. But how do we know, to some of the trustees' points, I don't want to come back here the next meeting and the next meeting and have somebody raise yet another issue. Now, that's not to say, like I said, we're all elected officials, right? We all vote our conscience. Nobody's making promises. I'm not going to promise anybody how I'm going to vote on anything in the future. So I reserve the right to change my mind based on things I hear. And you all do too, and that's a reality, and that's a fact. But we have to work together and come to a point where we are ready to commit. And we're ready to commit no matter what we hear. And that point has to come, and it may not come next week, and it may not come next month. But we have to get there, or we're never going to move this forward. So my suggestion is, let's poll the community as much as we can right now and figure out what it will take each of us individually to be ready to move forward. And then let's do it.
Okay, all right, thank you.
I think this is a great first step, but then Trustee Miller's suggestion kind of brought in something new that none of us might have thought before. And I don't know to what extent that can be done, but if not, to me, this is, I have no problem with this, regardless of the impact on next year's budget. We'll work out the budget when we have to. Now, maybe the administration can look at, Trustee Miller's proposal to, phase in a first bond and then a second bond later, and see, we can discuss in the meantime, in between. But we're going to need a lot of maybe close meetings just for that, not this extended 2 weeks or 3 weeks because of time. We're going to need to get together,
That's true.
regularly.
Yep.
Maybe on a weekday, twice on a week or something like that, to look at these, the process, how it works, how it's,
Yeah.
So we would need that, so.
I agree.
Can I just ask everyone's opinion, just generally? If we feel confident in presenting to the community that we have a concrete plan, we have concrete oversight, that we all believe in, will be effective. We have a good, do you really think the community, I don't know the answer. Do we really think the community cares whether it's 50 million or 80 million or 100 million? As long as we have plenty of safeguards in place and we know where the money's going to go and we know the direction it will take the district?
Well, eventually, we're going to have to pay taxes.
They do.
You know, yeah, and I think that you know, some people are very tax conscious.
Yeah.
I think
So-
if the board decides to move in that direction and decide to put together two separate bonds, the timetable would change to the extent that we have to now recreate the RFP
course.
because the scope of the work is different. So this timetable changes. Even the January timetable would still change because we have to put that RFP out again with new parameters.
Yeah.
So if the goal is to get some work going this summer, that proposal will not accomplish that end.
Okay.
And because of the 90-day timeline, if it really is 90 days, if that's correct, then no matter what we do, we have one shot at this before May,
That is correct.
right?
Doesn't it
Yeah.
cost us
Whatever
some-
the amount is, we only have one shot.
And it doesn't cost us just from a timetable standpoint, it's costing us financially. The business superintendent just informed us that it's costing us, due to this change right here, that we just put on the table, that some of us are ready to do. It's gonna cost our students $300 and something thousand dollars. What you say, $100 and something $million for pre-bond services that already took place, $72 million, $72,000 for modulars, and then there was another cost. It was close to almost
Pennington
$400,000
schematic?
that is going to cost us because board members cannot make up their mind.
No,
We all have a responsibility.
Omar, let's not,
That's what it's gonna-
but
that's
let's
what-
just put that to bed. We've been down that road, let's just move
Okay.
on, okay?
No, wait,
Because
excuse me,
we're going to
excuse me.
decide on what we're going to do.
Okay, but I'm talking about $400,000
But we-
that's going to cost
he
us.
already
That's not,
t-
that's
he
not
already-
minor.
He already told us.
That's not, exactly.
We
And
can
I'm
add, we
reiterating
got
the
that.
fact
We got that.
of what it's going to cost us. So it's not only costing us time-wise, just so we remember, it's not only costing us time-wise, it's costing us from a financial standpoint as well. So while we're just sitting here and it's not coming out our own pockets.
It is coming out of our pockets.
It's coming out the district's budget, close to $400,000, that's eventually going to impact our students.
Okay, all right. So-
Can I remind Trustee McDowell that number one, the last $100 million bond, we had millions of dollars of waste.
on the board then, I
And
can't
so
speak to that.
that cannot
We just wanna make
compare
sure
to
we
the
have
400,000
oversight.
he speaks of. And number two, the 400,000 you speak of is not all wasted. All right, that work doesn't go in the garbage. I mean, that a lot of that work continues to live on. So put it out there. It's fear mongering.
Okay, all right, so are we going into executive session now?
We can, but I don't know that we have any
What have we
closure here.
This is just,
What have we resolved?
Yeah, what are we doing? Are we moving with this timetable with the $100 million bond? Are we revisiting it and breaking it into two parts? When will part one be? When will part two be?
I think if us breaking it into two parts does create a bigger issue now, because we may get defeated on the second one, and then the schematics may have to change, so I think
well, so
we just need
obviously,
to, we need to just keep the,
come to agreement as soon as possible.
yeah, we actually do.
We all have to get behind it and speak with one voice to the community, because if this bond doesn't pass, then we'll be going to an austerity budget.
Can
promptly, 'cause our budget
can
won't
the RFP be a shorter timetable and still get it done for an end of January vote,
I don't think so.
A
Mr.
shorter
Silver?
timetable?
But,
right?
yeah.
No, a new architect would have to have time. Yes, Mr. Zamora is correct in that much of the work would be usable with some modification or not with modification, but they would still have to become familiar with the buildings, with the building condition survey, with the plans that we want to do. This is tight even at 2.5 months.
What if we end up voting for the current architect anyway?
Right.
That could change things.
And
Then-
that's what I'm thinking,
Yeah,
is we
I
go
mean-
through this
But the
whole process.
problem,
and
the
it's
problem with
still
that
the
is you
architect.
need to have a 45-day notice from the time the board passes a resolution for the bond to when the vote is.
We're
So
kinda
think
back.
about if you decided on the same architect on January 5th, or whatever that is, you're still well into the end of February before you could do that.
All right, so if I can summarize what I think I'm hearing from the board and try to bring us to closure, that there are two issues on the table. One is the RFP and giving it more time for other firms to respond, and two is getting oversight in place. And if that is indeed, if those are the only two issues, then what we've presented to you tonight would address that. We've already talked about getting the architect on. Our next meeting, we will talk about the authorization to create the position pending the development of a job description and resolving it what legal counsel and civil service to the extent that that's necessary. But it sounds like there is no discussion, there's no disagreement on the vision that has been put forth. So now, if those are indeed the only two issues, I think we have a resolution. But what I need to know from this board is if we march in that vein, have we indeed addressed all of your concerns?
I believe, I have a comment, if I may.
I'm fine with
Can you hear me?
it. Yes, we can hear you. Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead, go ahead.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. So going back to Trustee Miller's advice on splitting up the bond, of that at this juncture, as I mentioned before. What that split is, I think maybe Mr. Silver could give us a better idea, along with the superintendent, where they could work it out in terms of what parts of the vision would be a phase 1 vision, a phase 2 vision. I think that, well, what I'd like to know is a little bit of clarity in terms of when do we propose the phase 2 vision in terms of rolling out that bond and bringing it to the community for a vote. Do we have an idea if we phase it out? Is it 3 months later? Is it 3 years later?
Nobody thought about it, trustee. It's a brand-new idea.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, what do you think, Ken?
Well, I think what Silver said earlier was that if the first bond passes, the second bond may not pass, so we can't even say when we can roll it out.
But the second bond would not have to be rolled into the budget if it failed. Well, it would have to be after the budget vote anyway, if you had a second bond vote. But we could structure it so that the first vote would be the things that we had to do and wanted to do the most, and the second would be that which would not affect the budget and would not have to change anything. It would just be continuing with the vision things we want to do. The timing of that would be up to the board.
Right, that's what I mean. I mean, it's not going to, we're not going to arbitrarily say we're going to do $50 million now and $50 million later. It's not going to be an arbitrary dollar amount.
No.
The bond is going to be based on what work you want to do.
Right.
Not what dollar amount you want to spend.
Yeah.
So
Priorities.
anything, I mean, we all have priorities. We could spend, $500 million in this district. We're not going to. Or we could spend 10 million extra, and we need more than that. We all agree. So what the number is, what matters more is what do we want to get accomplished, and what have we already promised the public we're going to get accomplished, and we have to go from there.
And I guess the other question is, and I have to rely on the board for that direction, and I don't know that this is a superintendent question, actually, but how will the public feel about presenting two separate bonds at two different periods of time? First of all, there's a cost to run an election, so we need to consider that as well. But are we in any way insulting the community by knowing that we need this $100 million bond and we're putting it in two different parts? People know what's going on. We've been talking about it. Should we just rip the Band-Aid off and deal with it? I don't know. I just don't know. As a taxpayer, I don't know how I would perceive, you're asking me to vote on a bond, vote on a general budget, then vote on another bond and another general budget. Let's assume it's a year cycle that we're talking about for the sake of argument. I think that's a lot.
I agree.
Do we have to do the
I have-
second bond?
Agree.
Do we have to do the second bond this year?
No.
No?
Have to vote on the second bond. We could vote on it next year, right?
Next year, 2 years?
Yeah.
One of the
As
things
long
that
as
we've
the-
been concerned about is how many things we have going on at the same time.
That's right.
So, what I'm thinking is, could there be, to Mr. Zamor's point, could there be a way that we could prioritize and phase it in? I mean, I know it's it's kind of reinventing the wheel, but is that also something we could put out to the community and say, how about, the whole thing, I'm from Missouri, show me? So we come out and we say, we're going to spend this amount, and we're going to document it, and we're going to have a complete transparency. It'll be on our website every week, or every month, an update on what we've done. And then, if we do that, and no tax impact, right, or de minimis, as we've talked about, $100 maybe, then we hope you'll trust us to finish the second phase of our program. I'm just saying that it might be more palatable. I know what you're saying, and I think there's risks either way. I'm just trying to come up with
I mean,
another.
Let's just go with the 100 million.
we
Let's just go
wouldn't
with the
hide it
100.
from the community. I think if that was the direction we was to decide to go in, you could go out and inform the community that this is the total amount of bond that we're gonna need. But we wanna ensure that you support it fully, and we wanna start out with a smaller bond. And as you continue to see the progress, we're gonna come back down the line to complete the work with a second bond that's gonna need community approval. So that's letting the community know in advance what the full scope is, and not just going out for one bond and then coming back, but letting them know in advance for the first bond. I mean, that's a possibility, but once again, it's changing the whole direction that we've been planning on all this time. And while it is a good plan,
It's a
and
good
it is
idea.
a good thought,
Good idea, but I think maybe we should
it
just.
goes back to changing,
We just-
continuing to change the scope and the direction that we started, like I said, back in May.
I think that.
I have a comment. Just to refresh everyone's memory, back in August, and Mr. Silver and the superintendent could remind the rest of the board, the size of the bond that we were talking about was roughly 30 million. At one point, I believe, we were talking about 40 million, 44 million. And then I was the one who came up with the suggestion that said, well, what would be the maximum that we could borrow without a tax impact or something very minimal? Then the number started to get closer to 100 million. So as Trustee McDowell keeps saying that we keep changing the vision, well, we really have broadened the vision and have made the vision larger, and now we're just pulling back slightly. I believe something to the tune of 75 million could probably address most of the things and get us 3/4 of the way there, get us 3 years into this bond before we go up for a second bond. And the other thing is that in Mount Vernon, everything that the public wants is result-oriented. For example, they want to see progress. They want to see that we've done something with the money before they would even think about a second bond. So I don't agree with proposing a second bond, even maybe a phase 2, not even putting that on the table. Just talk about all the things that we could do in phase 1, get it done, and then by that, the community will see that, hey, you know what, they did it. Another thing I want to add to this is that if everything was going so well with our current status, with the way we have the architecture, the district architect set up, if everything was so rosy and so grand, our district would not look like this, okay? Obviously, what we have now is not working, and that's why we want to add additional steps to make sure that it works better in the future.
We have to revise the bond.
So 75 million is what I'm proposing.
Okay, so
right.
it sounds like there is synergy to move to essentially retool the presentation, retool the scope of the bond, come up with a smaller dollar amount, and anticipate priority 1 and priority 2, which may be sometime down the line. Is that the direction we're going in? Which means that this would look like this moving forward. The administration would rework the bond and identify what priority 1 would be, and then put together an RFP after we come to the board, put together an RFP that would outline the scope of whatever that priority 1 would be, and then come back to the board once that RFP, we have considered all those responses, and then there would be an appointment of an architect, and then the timetable would move forward from there.
Sorry, but just so I'm clear, I thought the whole point of suggesting the split was so that we're not doing an RFP.
Right.
We're keeping on the timeline to save ourselves money on the budget.
Yes.
Any retooling and an RFP changes our timeline on the budget.
Right.
Absolutely.
That's
We're
the
starting
point,
over.
was.
That's not
Thank
what,
you.
that's not
Thank you,
what,
trustee.
what I was proposing was
Yeah.
just going forward the way we've agreed to go
Agreed to go.
forward.
Yeah.
Just go forward now with a small, but with a smaller bond. We go ahead with it with the like we've agreed, we've selected, they've done the work, and just go forward with that portion of it.
I think we
With
need-
the oversight that we all know we have
I
to
think we
have.
need attorney advice on whether or not,
We can change the scope.
exactly.
The scope of the work for the architect.
And I don't know that that gets to the issue that was raised, and that was the amount of time that the RFP was out there to begin with. I don't know that that resolves that.
Can I ask the attorneys a question?
No. I mean, you
I'm
can.
sorry to-
Well, admit that attorney advice should be in
Yeah,
executive
it should be an
session.
executive session. No, Omar.
Okay, yeah, so,
No,
we'll
Absolutely
ask them
not.
exactly.
no, you ask,
All
I
right,
won't
so-
answer.
So what?
Right,
what-
make a motion for
Let's
executive
go,
session.
a motion for executive session, please,
For what
Motion.
purpose?
to discuss.
Yes.
We have a lawyer on board.
Motion to go into executive session for the purposes of discussing matters linked to the discipline of a person or persons, matters related to a special education litigation, and matters concerning an employment, contractual agreement with a district vendor.
And legal advice.
Motion,
Contract that I mentioned.
motion,
So moved. Second.
Pretty lengthy tonight, right?
At the rate we're
we
going.
should be out, I'm sorry, don't yell from the floor, Mr. Keller, but we should be out in about a half an hour. We should be out in about a half an hour. Am I correct? Half an hour, 45 minutes, Mr.
All
Keller.
those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Opposed?
Public session?
Motion.
Second.
Okay.
Dell, Mr. McOwen, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Oh. Abstain? Motion carries.
Okay. Convene opportunity for board members to remove anything from the consent agenda. Opportunity for board members to remove anything from the consent agenda.
There were two
I'm
items
sorry,
removed.
could you say that again?
Opportunity for board members to remove anything from the consent agenda.
Yes. I have a couple items.
Okay. Which items were they?
Just for discussion purposes, 11.3 and 11.4. That's Casone Leasing and the William Scottman rental. Just want to have a discussion on that.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, so we move those.
And I believe 14.1 and 14.2 have already been moved from the consent, correct?
Yes, there were two,
Yes.
yes.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
All right. Anybody else? Okay. Authorization to, approval of consent agenda items.
Motion.
Trustee Miller?
Second.
Trustee
Second.
McOwen.
Okay.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Abstain? Motion carries.
Is this when he talks about his ones that he removed? Mr. Zamora, would you like to discuss the items you removed?
We need a motion and a second to put 11.3 back on the floor for discussion.
Motion.
Trustee Miller?
Second.
Trustee Saunders?
All right, Mr. Zamora, you got the floor.
Okay, so this is directed towards Mr. Silver. He probably knows more about it. The Casone Leasing invoices, what exactly were those for? And also the William Scottman, they said storage. What type of storage are we paying for?
Those were storage bins that have been on our premises for, those are storage bins that had been on our premises for a number of years, storing things like debris, or not debris, but kitchen equipment, things from when the wall collapsed in the auditorium. It was used to store lockers, other equipment, so those bins are done. The board had requested they be gone, and that's paying the bills for the last month or two before they were removed.
So both of those are gone and they're removed from the district?
I know they're emptied. I don't know if they've actually been removed yet. I thought they're not, but they're emptied, ready to be gone, but not gone yet.
So if they're not gone yet, does this mean that we're going to still incur leasing charges?
No, we have no further leasing charges. They just haven't come for them yet.
Okay, that's fine. Do we have any more of these containers throughout the district that we're paying lease on?
We have no more
that currently
containers.
Stores things that, I'm sorry?
We have no more containers.
Okay, I know that there's one behind the high school next to the auto repair between the greenhouse. Was that one of these?
Yes.
Okay, so that's going to be removed. Okay, thank you. Well, in light of that explanation, I would move to approve these two items, 11.3 and 11.4.
Can we put it back on
Put
the,
it back on the consent agenda, right?
We already voted.
No, we can just vote on it.
Just vote
Just
on it.
supposed to be two separate
Vote on
motions.
it.
Yes.
We have to vote on these individually.
Yes.
Okay.
Missed a good thing.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. 14.4, authorization to pay William Scotsman, Inc. Motion?
Aye.
Second?
I'm sorry, what number is this?
This is the William Scotsman one, the second one.
Oh, yes.
11-4.
11.4. Sorry, it's been a long night.
Correct, yes. I thought you said 14. All right, yes.
He did, yeah.
I
did.
second if there wasn't a second.
Okay.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Abstain? Motion carries.
Okay.
Now we're at 14.1, approval of Excel projects.
So I,
Yes, regarding the 14.1,
We need a motion, please, I'm sorry.
Motion.
Motion, second.
Trustee McOwen,
I second.
trustee Saunders.
McDowell.
McDowell. I'm off my game
Oh.
tonight.
okay. Do I have the floor?
Yes. Oh, I apologize.
All right, regarding this, we did meet with administration regarding this project over at the high school. It was agreed upon that, based on the changes that we recommended, that the architects would come back to us with a newly proposed budget and scope of work. That has not been done yet, therefore, it is not my recommendation to move forward with this at this time. I suggest we table it to the next board meeting. And that also is for item 14.2.
I thought 14.4 was just for payment.
That was 11.
Well, 14.2 is payment for items based on the scope
14.1.
that we've changed and that we finally, have agreed upon. So I don't see why we should pay for services that have not been fully rendered.
Okay.
Sorry, how do we change the scope of this work? What are we doing?
What do we, yeah.
I'm sorry?
How are we changing the scope of this work?
Well, the scope of work, for example, it's some minor details, but one is the type of curtains that are going to be used at the high school. They're going to, instead of being automatic roll downs, they're going to be walk-in draw, basically your typical curtain as you know them, with ripple folds. Number two is going to be the type of logos put on the bleachers rather than the MVHS. It's going to be the knight on the horse. Another one is going to be the location of the electrical equipment and low voltage equipment that's going to work the scoreboards. The location has been moved. We're talking, and painting of the high school gymnasium ceiling. That was not on the agenda before. I'm sorry, on this particular proposal. So those are the sorts of things that have been reworked that need to be represented to the subcommittee, and then they could come before the board for approval.
Okay, all right.
And,
The motion to
and just to
table.
be clear, my understanding, maybe Mr. Silver can expound, my understanding is this would result in a no cost change or even lesser cost to do more work. There's just some suggestions, right?
That's what I was
We
trying to
do,
get to.
we do not know that the cost will be less. We know
Okay.
that we have changed from an electrified curtain coming up and down to a hand-drawn side-by-side curtain. We know that that will cost less, but we have now added in painting the ceiling and doing some work on the walls around the gymnasium, and that will cost more. We do not yet have the proposal from the architect for for what the new cost will be estimated at.
Right.
So we should have that, and we can get it on the next agenda.
And this was always, this is paid for by bond, right? This is bond.
This is paid
No, no.
for from the Excel bond.
Excel
That's, yeah,
bond.
from the Excel
Right.
bond, that's what, not the new bond, yes.
Yeah.
I should
Okay.
point out that the
Yeah.
Excel bond has no cost to us.
Right.
Right.
We think the manual is better than
Yeah,
the
that's what I was about to
automatic?
ask, the same thing. What was the
It'll,
rationale
long
behind?
term?
Mr. Zamora will have to speak to that.
Leslie, sorry, Mr. Zamora, the long-term usage of the manual curtains?
Sure.
is
Well,
better
number
than
one,
automatic?
if you have some electrical issue or mechanical problem, it doesn't stay halfway or go up. It can't roll down. These are it would be 4 individual curtains that would split the gym into 4 quadrants. Number 2, the type of system you had before, a roll down, would create a very taut sort of like wall out of vinyl, which would make it easily puncturable by the kids. They could put a blade through it or stick a pen in it, and then it would end up with patchwork that would then be very, very unappealing. Versus the walk-in draw, typically those pose no problem because they're only on sort of like a track and wheel on top, and you just literally pull it and you literally push it back. And because it's not taut, it's a ripple fold, chances of a kid trying to puncture it is less than a flat wall that rolls down from the ceiling that's taut. So that was the rationale behind that, and it saves us a lot of money that we could do, possibly get some other things into it, such as painting the high school gymnasium ceiling, which looks like it hasn't been painted since they built the place. So if this proposal, which is more for a renovation rather than just bleachers and curtains, if we're looking at that, then let's look at the entire scope and do it once and not have to go back to it, and do it intelligently so we don't create problems for ourselves in the future with the electrical and mechanical things going up and down.
Got it.
Okay. All right, thank you.
So what are we doing? Are we tabling these until we get new proposals? Okay.
All right.
So do we need a motion to table?
Trustee Zamora made a motion, I just need a second.
Second.
Trustee Miller.
Thank you.
Both 14.1 and 2.
Yeah.
Yep.
Correct.
All right, moving next to committee report.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries.
Before we move on, I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome to our administrative team, Mrs. Michelle Brownlee-McKitty, who has been approved tonight as our coordinator for the Family and Community Engagement.
Welcome.
She is already a teacher in our district and will be moving into this new position. This has been a very long search, so we expect a lot of you.
Thank you.
No pressure.
Okay, so we're moving on to committee reports? Okay. Should we start with,
There's a motion to postpone them till the next meeting.
I make a,
No, we should talk
Let's do them.
about
all right, let's just do them a minute or less.
A meeting
Can we
and a
do
half.
that? Okay. Okay. Any, Omar, Micah?
Only to schedule, the next policy committee meeting will be December 9th.
right,
Is
for
that
the
a board
policy
meeting
and the community engagement.
We'll have
That
the-
invitation?
I sent
What
out
time?
a request for,
Okay, so we're all agreed that we...
So we're going to have the next policy committee meeting, let's do it this way. We'll have the Parent and Community Engagement Committee meeting at 8 a.m. on the 9th, and then we'll have the Policy Committee meeting at approximately 8:30, or whenever the first one ends. We'll just do them roughly at the same time.
Okay,
Um,
thank you.
Rick, are you writing those down?
Okay.
And were you going to say something about parent and community engagement?
Well, I was going to say something just about relative to community engagement, and that is just that I had breakfast with Demia Harris from City Hall, who runs the Youth Bureau, and she's very interested in meeting the new trustees. So with your permission, I will introduce you to her electronically, because they provide a tremendous amount of programs and services to the district, and she would just like to meet the other trustees to explain what she does. She'd like to make a presentation to the board, but I don't know if that's necessary, 'cause most of us know what the Youth Bureau does. But she was very interested in meeting you, so if it's okay with you, I will just introduce you electronically. That would be Wanda, Leslie, and Micah.
Thank you. All right. Wanda?
We had our CNI committee meeting on November 12th at 8 o'clock. We watched the video on personalized education, customized education to the individual student's needs. But it must have rich technology included in that. Children can be self-directed through their learning environment. The video was so interesting, and we're hoping that we will be able to present it to the parents at one time, Mr. Gorman. And
Dr. Hamilton and I are viewing that movie. They sent you a clip today.
Okay, at a later date. We also discussed the new program that is being pilot by 3 first grade and 4th grade teachers in Columbus, Grimes, and Trapegan, which is called Envision. And our next meeting is December 17th at 8 a.m.
Charmaine? Thank you.
Thanks. I just wanted to thank our audit committee members. We have 2 board members, Dr. Ning and Trustee McDowell, and we also have 2 community members, Thomas Keller and Beresford Granston. I'd also like to thank Mr. Silver for his work on the audit committee presentation and also for his work with our external auditors. I'd also like to thank Mr. Zachariah for his work as well. I'd like to also ask this board if they know anyone who would be interested in joining the audit committee. We have a lot of work ahead of us. And also for this board to consider any strategic audits that we should be doing over the coming year with our internal auditors. They normally come in, I think it's the beginning of the year, to start a process, and administration has already identified one area that we should do a closer audit, a strategic audit on. Mr. Silva, do you want to talk about that briefly?
Sure. Can I get back that mic? Thank you. There have been some discussion having to do with targeting something to do for an internal audit, and we came up with the teacher retirement system being a great target. We spoke to the internal auditor. There has been a big discrepancy about what we've been paying and what we've been billed, and the state version of this and our version of it, and we believe that a reconciliation is in order, and it will take a dive, a deep look. We thought about doing it on our own, and we decided that this would be something that would be appropriate for an outside internal auditor to take a look at, rather than trying to have our staff take a look at what we've done ourselves. This goes back some more than 5 years that this discrepancy has taken place, and we want to resolve it. And we will, I'll be working with Ms. Fearon to develop what we're going to do and meet with the internal auditors and get this moving. And we will report to you as soon as we have something. It shouldn't take that long, it shouldn't cost that much, but we feel it's important we resolve it.
Okay. I'd be interested in joining the audit committee if you meet at a reasonable time.
Yeah, I've been flexible,
Okay.
mornings
All
or
right, we'll
evenings.
talk about it.
So
I'll be happy.
I'd like to, once I have an additional member, we need to go and poll the group again about what time works best for everyone.
Okay, no problem.
Flexible.
Thank you. Mr. Rose, anything?
No, we didn't have a meeting.
Okay. Dr. Nate?
The education meeting report and the audit committee.
Okay. The only thing I have is, I just want to mention that Dr. Hamilton, myself, and Ms. Guyon and Ms. Rachel DePaul, we had a special education meet and greet last week, about a week or so ago, and it was very well received. I'm so happy to see so many parents come out. There was some, I think I did get an email or a text from someone that said that they were not happy, but please send us whatever issues you have, concerns you have, and we'll try to get those addressed. The next one, the next meeting we're going to have is sometime in January. We haven't really pinned a date down, but look forward to that. And we are probably going to have it maybe at, we're looking at Thornton School or some school inside the city so we can get parents to come. Second thing I have is the food pantry. We had November 7th, which was very well attended. We ran out of food, and we still had maybe 100 people we hadn't given food, so we had a lot of people. So they promised to bring more food next time. And the next food pantry giveaway will be Saturday, December 5th.
Yes.
December 5th. The setup is at 9:30, distribution is at 10 to 11, December 5th, at Parker School parking lot. Okay, that's all I have.
And before we close, just want to remind the board of the holiday and the public of our holiday concert, December 5th, at 7 o'clock, Mount Vernon High School. Admission is a canned good and a wrapped toy.
Oh.
Unwrapped toy. Thank you.
How are we doing with those bicycles?
I got a check today from Sister Trustee White. And we now have about 15 bikes paid for. We only have 85 more to go.
So, all right, so we'll do that too. All right.
And Ken, how much is each bike?
They range from 60 to 90 bucks, depending on the size.
Okay, gotcha. So you could put me down for 10 bikes.
Woohoo! Thank you.
I'm putting that in the minutes.
And he also, by the way, Mr. Zamora, also offered a, what do they call Mr. Zamora?
A hoverboard.
A hoverboard.
Balance down.
Yes.
That could be a grand prize, I
Yep.
tell you, huh?
I may read
That's
for
what
that.
everybody wants, one of those. Those are nice. All right, so,
You topped me, now he topped you.
I know.
if that's it, we can adjourn, motion to adjourn? Motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Motion.
All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Oh, thank you. You too.
We're good?
I'm thankful for my friends, my family, my teachers. Thank you. I'm thankful for my family, my friends, and my community. Hello, I'm thankful for my family, my community, and food. I'm thankful for my friends and my family.
Yeah.
You want cornbread? There's one per class? Yeah. Miss
Who's it?
I'm thankful for my family, my friends, and food, and for this house that I have.
All right, Angeline, did you talk? Angeline? Aren't you gonna get cornbread? And Mr. Phelps, you can do the cornbread and the corn.
All right.
And I'll get us a corn.
Let me get over this side.
I'm thankful for my family. Today, I'm thankful for gathering up with my family and sitting around the table and playing games and giving thanks to Thanksgiving. I'm thankful for my family. I am thankful for my family, my community, and my friends.
Huh? Cornbread?